So Next.js just got released some few days ago, and in this video I'm going to be talking about some of the features, sharing my opinions on some things, and also explaining some concepts that some people might find difficult to understand. So basically, there are three kinds of Next.js developers at the moment. The first category are Next.js developers who are scared to upgrade their version of Next.js from from an older version of Next.js to Next.js 14. And the reason is that they are scared of Next.js, the latest version of Next.js, not being stable enough. I know some developers, they were like, they will not move over to Next.js 13 because some things are not stable, the server action is not stable, they are not sure about the app router being stable and all of that. And the other category of Next.js developers are the ones that are scared of the security measures that the Next.js team are taking. They are concerned about coupling their server code with their client code, and this I quite understand because it can be scary when you have server code and your client code together. You don't really know how that is working. And the last category of developers are React developers who want to switch over to Next.js but are concerned about the learning curve. Now, for these three sets of developer, I would like to address them individually. So for the first category of developer that is concerned about the stability of Next.js, you don't need to worry because from the Next.js release, this version of Next.js was all about making the Next.js framework stable, and you don't have to start throwing experimental flags in your Next.js config file. For the second set of developers that are concerned about security measures, the Next.js team actually released a blog post that outlines some security guidelines that you should follow when building your Next.js applications, so you don't have security vulnerabilities in your application. For the last set of developers that are thinking of the learning curve to switch over to Next.js, please get started. There's not much learning curve. Next.js is pretty easy to get started with. You can watch an hour crash course and easily get started with it. So let's get started looking at some of the features. So right here, we're on the Next.js blog and we see some of the features highlighted. And the first of them is Tobo Pack. Tobo Pack is a bundling tool that is built into Next.js using Rust, and it claims to bundle your project very fast. So let's test this out. So over here, we have a sample Next.js project that I've created. This is Next.js 14. You can see that this is Next.js using the latest version of Next.js. And we want to test out the Turbo Bundler. And the way we can do this is test out how fast your normal dev script is going to run. So if you run npm run dev, let's wait. This ran in 2.9 seconds and our application was ready in 2.9 seconds. Let's test out Turbo. So to use Turbo, all you have to do is add this flag in your scripts -- Turbo and restart your dev server. You can see that our application was ready in 991 milliseconds, which I think is really fast and an improvement on what we used to have. Although this is not still this is not like perfectly ready. You can watch and monitor when it's going to be ready on this side. So these are all the tests. It has 92% of the test passing. So once everything is passing correctly, once all the tests are passing, this is going to be a stable release for Tobo Pack. The next feature we have is server actions, which is now stable. And if you don't know what server actions is, server action is a way that you can mutate your backend data from the front end. So let's go back to our VS Code, and I'm going to create a form page just to demonstrate. So create a form page. So normally, if you are creating a form, you are going to have a form, like the way developers used to create a form before. You have a form, you have an input field, you have a submit button, right? You have a submit button of type submit, and your inputs, you give it a name. So let's say we are building a conference attendance list, and we want to have the names of people that attend the conference in our database. So we'll give this name of this input field to be attendance, and this field is going to be required. This field is going to be required, right? So the way we would have done things is, in this form, we are going to have a method which is going to be a post method that is going to, and we're going to have this post method, and we're going to have an onSubmit event handler which is going to call a function, right? So let's say this function is called add attendance, and here we have our function, add attendance function, and this is basically it. So in this function, you are going to, this is where you normally do your API call, you mutate your component state. This is where you do all of that. The way we used to do forms, we used to create forms in a client component. You do all that here, and your client component will have to make a request to the backend and wait for the response. You have all those latency, and depending on how fast your internet is, how long that request is going to take. And the Next.js team was like, what about having this function, right, in the backend, like having this function called in the backend, and that is where we derive the term server actions from. So server actions are actions that are being called on the server. Like, it's as simple as that. So how do we turn this to a server action? So I have JSON server running. I have JSON server running over here, which is looking at this db.json file and adding, you can make requests to add attendance or delete attendance or whatever API requests, REST API requests you normally make to a server. So I have it running, and I'm going to be converting the form we have over here to a server action, or this function to a server action. So the first thing we do is, let's remove this. We are going to add an action, and let's call it add attendance. And an action is always async. It has to be an async function. This function has to be an async function, and it has to have this use server directive. It has to have this for this to be considered a server action. Now, first of all, let's get all the attendance from our database. So let's write a function. Let's write a function to get our attendance. And over here, we're going to make a request to the server. You can see this is running on localhost on port 3004. All right. So if our response is not okay, we want to throw an error. And if it's okay, we want to return our JSON. So this is the way you make API calls in a server component. You can use the fetch request, you can write this function, and you can get it in your page right here. So let's do that. Let's do just that. So we can get our attendance. This component has to be an async component. We can get our attendance, and we can loop over this our attendance. We can loop over our attendance, our attendee, the attendee for this event. And we just want to display the name. TypeScript is complaining here. We can just give this any for now. So if we go over to our page, let's go to /form to see that page. We have our input field, we have our submit, and we want the behavior of this form to be that when we put a name, an attendance name, let me say Victor, and we click on submit, it is going to call that action. It is going to call this add attendance action that we have here. And in this add attendance action, what we are going to be doing here is making a call that is going to mutate our database. So we can make a request, and we want to pass in the body, which we are going to be getting from our form data. So we want to pass in an ID and a name, which is going to be the attendance name. Because if you look over here, we have this ID and name for our attendance. So that is what we want to pass in. And we want that ID to be random. So we can create a random ID. So to get the name, we have to use this form data of type form data. And we can get the name out of our form data. We can get the name, and we have to pass in the name that we put in our form here, which is attendance. So now we're making a post request to this route, and we want to add attendance name. So let's go back to our application. Let's refresh. Okay, we don't have any error. Let me add Victor. Okay, one thing we should note is that you want to revalidate the page data each time you make a request. So let me say we made this request. We want to make sure that we have the latest data for this page over here. So we can make use of this revalidate parts from Next.js, and we can pass in the parts that we want to revalidate, which is this form page. And if we add the name Amara, we can see that we get the latest, we get what's updated on the database. So we can add attendance, and you can see it's added. Now, what if we want to, because this form right here is on the server, because this is a server component, all pages that is in the app router is a server component, a server page. So what if we want this form to be on the client, and we want to call this our server action? Because you can call a server action from a server component, but you cannot call a server, you cannot declare the server action in a client component. If you want to call the server action from the client component, you have to define it elsewhere in another page. Make sure it has this use server and import it here and call it from this client. So let's make this use clients to make it a client form. Let's copy what we have here. This server action, add attendance, create a new page, a new file here, call it action.ts, paste it over here. Make sure we have this revalidate parts, and make sure we export this function. Export this function. And right here we can import, we can remove this, we can import add attendance from the action, we can remove the one we have here, and everything is supposed to work as usual. So let's go back to our page. Okay, we have to import, we have to save our, make sure your file is saved. And we are getting this error. Let's restart our dev server. Okay, we are getting an error. Let's look at what we are doing wrong. So make sure that you have this use server, make sure that it's at the top. Make sure this directive is at the top of this file. For any action that you are doing, make sure that use server is at the top. This should work now. So if we add the name Joshua, we see it's added. So that's it for server action. The next feature we have here is partial pre-rendering. So the way like imagine when you go to a React website, right, and there's this before you get the initial response of that page, it takes a while and you have to see like a white screen before your page data comes in or your HTML is rendered. And partial pre-rendering is a way that it works with suspense, and it's a way that you can get an initial HTML while you wait for your page data to load. So you have your suspense boundary, and I think this is really helpful for loading skeletons. And this is what you are going to have. So your page, when you make a request and you have your suspense boundary covering your components, you are going to get that initial HTML with the skeleton first. It's as if your HTML is being cached. That is the behavior. It behaves like your HTML is being cached, and you are going to get that HTML very, very quickly before the remaining of your page is being rendered. And the last update we have, the last feature from Next.js is Next.js Learn. So they release some courses that developers can follow to improve their knowledge on how to use Next.js in their projects. So that's it for this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.